In October 2020, I was in Egypt as part of the LAI group. They form groups of supporters of alternative history and accompany such groups along a route that covers all or almost all ancient sites related to the ADC, otherwise known as Ancient Highly Developed Civilizations, or more simply, to the civilization of the ancient gods. In any case, our distant ancestors called them that way, so I was lucky to get into such a group. Those who have been to Egypt know how many wall paintings were left to us by the Egyptian civilization. But were they all left by the Egyptians? That is the question. It would seem that not all. Those of the highest quality, the most detailed, and I would say the most informative, were left by the gods themselves. And one such painting in the lower room in the temple in Dendera led me to the theory that grew into this film. Here is that painting. It was made not by traditional chiseling, but on the contrary by removing excess material. As a result of this, the image comes out three-dimensional and therefore more contrasting. It depicts 4 columns with conventionally human faces and either arcs or sarcophagi over them. From each such sarcophagus a wavy line flows, and they all gather in a single vessel in the form of a bowl or a tall vase. But the most interesting detail is located between the 3rd and 4th columns on the right. Some kind of ball, inside of which, at maximum magnification, a broken line is visible, which is very similar to a standing electromagnetic wave. The image of stability is given to it by the ball itself, which is located inside a stylized boat or scales. It is balanced, which means it is stable. For some time, I looked at this drawing with the feeling that I had already seen these columns somewhere, quite recently. And I realized where. I saw them in the pillar hall at the entrance to the temple, a huge room located immediately behind the main entrance, filled with precisely these columns. No, not similar, but exactly these. Look. The same faces, the same square sarcophagi above them. In the painting, they were even given volume, so as not to be confused for sure. And it seemed impossible to confuse. I mean, those who left this image, it's probably wrong to call it a painting, really wanted us to not get confused, since in this image lies the principle of operation of a technical device, user instructions if you prefer. So let's try to read these instructions. Part 1, the theory. If we use the fact that a ball with a broken line inside it is a standing electromagnetic wave, then something must create it. It can be created by an inductor coil, which was the column, or rather, all the columns. Of course, if you add something to them. And so, let us go in order. Classic inductors are constructed with one or more windings wound on a magnetic or non-magnetic frame. Here is an example of the simplest single wound inductor without a core, or in the language of physics, with an air core. If you apply voltage to the ends of this winding, you get such a picture with magnetic lines of force. These lines pass through the inner space of the winding and create an electromagnetic flux, which is an electromagnetic field. The power of such a field or its inductance depends on the diameter, length of the winding, and the number of turns. But in our case, the most interesting thing is the diameter. That is why the already rather large columns have expansions in the central part. At this point, experts can say that in modern electrical engineering, practical applications use coils with a conductive core. Yes, I know. But this fact does not deny the possibility of a coil with a non-conductive core, and even one without it. That is, the granite column in this case is a non-conductive core and only serves as a frame for winding, although its dimensions directly affect the magnitude of the inductance of the coil. In addition to coils with one winding, there are coils with 2 windings. They are called Tesla coils because it was Nikola Tesla who patented this device. Such a coil consists of a primary winding, which contains a small number of turns at a certain distance from each other, and a secondary winding wound tightly along its entire length. The primary winding is usually made from a larger diameter wire, or even a copper strip. The maximum voltage in such coils is concentrated at the top. For clarity, the Tesla coils have an electric sphere on top, which sparks from high voltage. The bottom line is that in a Tesla coil, the voltage between two adjacent turns is greater than with a conventional single-wire winding by half the voltage applied to the coil. In simple terms, a coil with two windings can conduct or simply hold a voltage higher than a coil with one winding. Each of the windings of such a coil is an oscillating circuit. So when the frequencies of oscillations of magnetic waves coincide in two windings, the phenomenon of resonance occurs, as a result of which there is a standing electromagnetic wave, which is shown in the original drawing. Furthermore, the inductance of the column coils connected in series, therefore, is equal to the sum of their own inductances. But that's not all. If the coils connected in series in a circuit are located close to each other, so that part of the magnetic field of one coil penetrates the magnetic field of the other and both coils are wound in one direction, then their total inductance increases further by an amount called the mutual induction coefficient. But that's just for two coils. In the column hall in Dendera, there are 4 rows of 10, and each of them falls into the magnetic field of at least 3 more. This means that the total inductance of the electromagnetic field of the pillared hall increases many times over. In addition to the coil, Tesla also patented a transformer, which is justly called Tesla's transformer. In addition to the coil itself, it includes a high voltage power supply and a storage capacitor. But upon closer examination, it is clear that this is an example of a sequential oscillatory circuit discovered by James Maxwell. The simplest oscillatory circuit consists of a capacitor, which can be made up of 2 parallel metal plates, and coils with at least 2 turns. Then follows the classic principle of action. A voltage is applied to the ends of the winding, an alternating current will flow between the turns, and an equal current will appear between the plates of the capacitor. That is, one electromagnetic field will create another. The classic example of such a transformer is a jed. Yes, the same jed, which is depicted in numerous drawings of Egyptian temples. In this figure, the primary winding is clearly highlighted and the secondary is visible. A sphere of maximum voltage is even drawn on top of the coil. And even higher is a 2-way capacitor, only it is not carried out at a distance, but is built directly into the coil. In that part of it where the highest voltage is created and accordingly transferred to the capacitor, resulting in a 2-for-1. The device is portable, compact, not very large, but not too small to provide just enough voltage for household needs. We will return to it at a later time. Now, look at these photos. This is the roof of the temple in Dendera. Couldn't these numerous marks be from parallel laid metal plates? And if so, then can't these metal plates laid across the entire roof be capacitors to which the voltage from the column coils was transmitted? And if so, then the capacitor plates, let's assume that they were copper, cannot help but heat up. Remember how you can boil a 3-liter can of water with 2 blades? Now look at the limestone structure just below the plates and compare it to the rest of the roof. It is porous from very high temperatures. It almost melted, if that word applies to limestone. Well, it's like heating cheese or dough. Isn't that evidence? At this point, an expert in electrical engineering or just an attentive person will say that this large transformer is missing two important parts: the high voltage power supply and the wire connection between the coils and capacitors. Well, no. Yes, I agree that there are none. In any case, not visible ones. But theoretically, a high power magnetic field can create an inductive coupling and displace current to adjacent conductive paths, which are metal plates. In regards to the power source, the solution lies on the surface in a very literal sense. The roof covered with metal plates acts as a magnet, and in working order, an electromagnet for lightning, which carry enough charge to run this transformer. You'll ask, where is there lightning in Egypt? I will answer, remember the traces of rain erosion on the Sphinx? Where there are rains, there are thunderstorms. Temples in Egypt were not built yesterday. Someone may ask, what to do when there is no lightning? Well, first of all, such a colony created a very powerful force field and could work for a long time from one starting charge. How long, I don't even presume. And secondly, the gods could create such a starting charge independently, manually, so to speak. For example, with the help of the Vajra. And here we come to a very important point. Well, let's say that numerous capacitors located on the roof received voltage from the coil columns. An electromagnetic field was created in them equal to the field of the coils themselves. What's next? The lower field will disappear, and immediately after, the upper one. Where is the storage of electricity? After all, the massive limestone on the roof cannot accumulate electricity. Or can it? Well, it turns out, yes, it can. Check out this article I found on the internet. I will read it in full. Electricity storage systems are not only high-tech, but can also be brutal, cheap, and practical. Instead of charging a complex device, an electrochemical battery, a simple stone can be heated with electricity. A company titled Siemens was able to commission such a plant. Welcome to the new Stone Age, written on the wall of the object. The pilot plant in Hamburg, Germany, housed at a decommissioned traditional power plant site, converts electrical energy into hot air to heat about 1,000 tons of volcanic rock to 750 degrees Celsius. Subsequently, during periods of high demand for electricity, the stored thermal energy is converted back to electricity using a steam turbine. Thanks to effective insulation, heat can be stored for a week or longer. Siemens says the pilot plant can store up to 130 megawatt hertz for a week. With this installation, the thermal energy storage will be thoroughly tested. In the next phase, Siemens plans to use its energy storage technology in commercial projects and increase storage and strength capacity. The goal is to store energy in the range of several gigawatt hours in the near future, the company said in a statement. Omitting all the details, let's focus on the main point. You can store electricity in stone. How much? How long? These questions await their answers. But the main thing is that you can. And pay attention to the inscription on the object. Welcome to the new Stone Age. How appropriate. Everything new is the well-forgotten old. With that, let's move on to the second part, the practice. The group of gods settled in the territory of the future Egypt chose just such a method of obtaining this energy. They are part of each house, and the temples are, of course, their houses. They lived in them, used for autonomous electrostations in order to receive electricity for each individual family. For this, a colonnade or a column hall was provided in each house. A copper coil was wound around each column, which was a winding or two windings. As a result, the column became an inductor. The operating principle of such coils I described in the first part. Thus, the column hall became an autonomous power plant in which a general electromagnetic field was created, which was transmitted to the roof, on which metal plates were located, which were storage capacitors. They accumulated electric voltage, heated up the limestone mass, which was an accumulator of heat and electricity. Such power plants were launched from lightning, which attracted the same metal capacitors located on the roof. But most likely a powerful electrical discharge was needed only once to start. Then, when a sufficient amount of energy was accumulated on the roof, it was enough to feed the lower columns of the coils. Thus, a closed cycle was created. Of course, the supply of energy dried up over time, but any lightning accelerated this cycle anew. If there were no thunderstorms, the gods themselves could have given such a discharge. They had the means for this. The same Vajra could herself be charged from such a station, so that later, if necessary, create a high voltage starting charge. Now we can say a few words about how the gods used electricity. Well, primarily for lighting. Any lamp getting into the electric field starts to glow. Someone can say, but what if the lamp is not within the field? In this case, there was a handy device. The JED. I said that we will come back to it. This is a portable transformer, which was powered in the area of the field of the column hall and distributed electricity itself wired from a two-way capacitor and wirelessly through the field that it created itself. Thus, it could be used where the overall force field lacked. Here are examples of connecting to a JED through a capacitor. In this picture, the columns are shown with windings. Here is an image of the maximum stress at the top of the column in the form of a sparkling hemisphere. Here, the places of maximum strength are shown in the form of vessels from which the ankh above is charged. Here is an image of charging household appliances from columns. Here's another one. And here, next to the columns, there's a whole stand for charging the ankhs and scepters. These are examples of the use of electricity in everyday life. But surely there were also large objects that needed charging. For example, modes of transportation. Surely they moved somehow. And judging by the fact that no roads were left behind, this was most likely done by air. Such an aircraft would sit on the roof of the Dendera Temple that is directly on the battery in the epicenter of its field and would charge its electric motors. Like a Tesla machine. Well, why not? In my opinion, it is very convenient. By the way, I have seen similar charging pads in other places of their stay. In Peru, Belize, and even in Turkey in the city of Hattusa. But not all at once. The topic of this film is the principle of obtaining electricity by a DC based on the example of the temple in Dendera. With this, I believe I have laid out this topic. Determining how well will be up to you.